Dragi gledatelji i gledateljice, lijep pozdrav u treću, odnosno četvrtu epizodu Libertas Talks podcasta druge sezone. Sa nama je danas jedan jako zanimljiv i jedan jako renovirani i aktivan gost koji se bavi sa diplomacijom. Velika mi je čast predstaviti indijskog ambasadora pri Republici Hrvatskoj, njegovu ekscelenciju Raja Kumara Srivastavu. Ambassador, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for having me, and I'm looking forward to share my experience of diplomacy of last 26 years with you who are learning international relationship, and I'm very happy to see the interest.
Yeah, we're very glad to have you here. If you would please be kind to take a minute or two to explain to our viewers your background, your education, your diplomatic work, your postings, please.
Yeah, so educationally I had done engineering. I had passed out my engineering Bachelor of Technology in Civil Engineering in 1993. Then I was doing M.Tech in structural engineering, which with a specialization on earthquake sciences. Okay. And then my destiny took me to the path of civil services, and then I got the offer of diplomacy in India. And that's how I got into this. So when I look backwards, it seems like that always there is a design, and you should play that design as it comes to you, rather than most of the time we are struggling to create our destiny. And sometimes we are trying to do something which is not matching with what happens, and we feel sad. But I found that having got into diplomacy from my technical background, looking back 26 years, I think I have reached the place where I actually belong to. So sometimes it is good that let the destiny takes its course and enjoy the moment.
And to enjoy the profession, the profession to sort of expand you as a human being, to make new connections, to make new people, and to kind of fulfill your life.
And also the technology, the background of technical knowledge has helped me in terms of having that view. And today in diplomacy, you have a very important pillar of technology. Yes. So having gone through the rigor of learning technology in a premier institute, I always feel more interested to talk about AI, talk about how the climate change has the technical component. And that's why I think diplomacy today is much better profession. It's not just information, it's about development.
Yeah, exactly. And the instant connection that two countries may have, two embassies may have, letters doesn't have to travel 3 or 4 days, right? It's instant messages, instant news. To sort of just to lay grounds on some data that I have gathered as regards to India. So India has over 81 billion, $400 million in military expenditures, making it the 4th largest expenditures in the world. It's the 5th largest economy by nominal GDP rates, and the 3rd largest economy in terms of purchasing power parity. India is also a member of the ASEAN +6, BRICS, G20, Commonwealth, and a founding member of the United Nations. So India is a very, I would say, a crucial part in international relations, international politics. But what is the background of the Indian diplomacy? What are the sort of structures, the core of Indian diplomacy that has made it achievable to these statistics, right? So the GDP rates, the purchasing power parity, how did diplomacy make that happen?
So diplomacy is about creating and building relationship between countries globally, and that's why we say diplomacy is bilateral diplomacy, it's plurilateral diplomacy. You took names of like BRICS and G20. Yes. So that is plurilateral because it's not multilateral because they are limited countries, and then multilateral like UN where everybody is there. Yeah. And the whole idea is that depending upon the themes, different platforms serves the purpose. And diplomacy, the language of diplomacy is basically the principles on which you come together. So when you look at India's history of last 75 years, from the time India became independent from the British rule, I always qualify this because India is a very, very old civilization, and that's why this 75 years is just a small part of the 5,000 year plus history. And the strength of India among people of India, among diplomats like me, comes from the fact that there is a huge history behind us. And when we talk about us as human beings, while we are from a particular nation, in terms of our birth, there is a genetic code that we are carrying. And that has a lot of cell memory. Beyond this body and mind, there is a lot of cell memory. And that's why we sometimes feel comfortable in a situation and uncomfortable in some other situation. And sometimes we don't have scientific explanation for that. That's why this knowledge and this awareness is important, that we are carrying with us a lot of subconscious memory. And from that point of view, if you look that, okay, there is an Indian who is now 50 years old, but there is some sense of deja vu when we talk about space science. And when you look at what space science, astronomy, India had achieved in terms of like 12th century Sur Siddhanta, where everything is explained, that whether this universe is heliocentric and that's the whole kind of knowledge that, so I, for example, coming from scientific background, 26 years of diplomacy, but in my free time I spend a lot of time in terms of understanding what are the new discoveries in space, in astronomy.
Okay, so that's your kind of niche, your hobby.
So that tells you that what interests you is some kind of sense of deja vu which is inside you. And that's why when you asked about this question, what gives India that background of diplomacy or the policies, it's because of this long history and long civilizational treatises. For example, Kautilya's Arthashastra, which is one of the treatises of diplomacy when we look at 2,500 years back. It is one of the best book in terms of how the diplomacy should be run, in terms of trying to do the best for everybody, but working with the neighbors is most important, because those are the ones who are geographically put to you. So that's why you see in any country's diplomacy, the neighbors' diplomacy becomes the neighborhood first policy. And we have that. So we spend a lot of time with our neighbors, like we have, like if you see the organization of our Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ministry of External Affairs, you have Director General for different divisions. So you have thematic divisions, you have geographical divisions. But when you look at neighborhood, we have 2 countries and 1 Director General. Whereas when you look at Southeast Asia, we have 10 countries and 1 Director General. So that means as you go farther away from the center of gravity, you have more countries under one belt. So that tells you that neighborhood becomes very important, and I think that applies to Croatia also, because I see much of the time Croatian diplomacy policy makers are spending in the region. Montenegro and Serbia and
Bosnia and Herzegovina,
and then EU,
of course,
and then of course India is also there, but it's far away. So naturally time spent on India will be relatively less, and if you have this awareness, then you don't feel bad about it, you feel this is very natural. Now having that condition, how to work out a relationship which is mutually beneficial, with the full awareness that there is limited time available for a distant country like India. I work primarily mandated by my Prime Minister and my Foreign Minister with strengthening people-to-people ties and strengthening business ties, strengthening ties among youth, because youth are the future, and see how our relationship is beneficial to the people of 2 countries, because we are democracies.
So by your words, as I have kind of gathered, diplomacy is something that can also be practiced between 2 people, whether it be friends or enemies or lovers, or a teacher and student, or a professor and student, right? So in a sense it could kind of expand towards communities between each other's businesses, and of course states between each other.
So let me just give you said it very nicely, that diplomacy is not a profession, it can be a social skill. Now my Prime Minister Modi came out with he comes out with very beautiful acronyms or some kind of small tricks to remember big things. So he proposed that we should have a 5 S principles for diplomacy. And these S's are basically 5 words started with sound sa in Sanskrit. the meaning of those 5 words is beautiful for diplomatic principles. So first is samman, which means respect. Mutual respect is very important when you come to the table. That applies to nations, that applies to individuals.
Exactly.
So respect, samman. Second, samvad, which is dialogue. We need to have dialogue first. That should be the first way in which we should try to resolve all our issues. So samvad and dialogue is very important. The third is sahyog, that is cooperation. So what is the main essence of diplomacy? Find cooperative mechanisms so that we can benefit the people of our countries. So sahyog, third. Fourth is shanti, which is peace. Can our relationship work towards global peace, regional peace, and bilateral peace? So shanti, fourth S. And the fifth S is samriddhi, which is prosperity. Can our initiatives create prosperity for the people?
Exactly.
So if you look at these 5 principles, these are irrespective of whichever country you think about, whichever people you think about. If your relationship is based on respect, dialogue, cooperation, peace, and prosperity. So these are the 5 principles that we take it as a very simple ways to develop all initiatives that we develop in countries.
So it could, the 5 S's could also be applied to internal politics as well as external politics.
Every day-to-day relationship.
That's so coming to the individual level.
Exactly. So the whole idea is that you should not create principles so difficult that you have to decide which principle to apply now or which principle to apply later. If your principles are commonsensical, your life will be very simple. And that's how today's India, in terms of development, what has happened in the last 10 years in India is especially that if government takes care of the poorest of the poor, rest all will fall in place.
Exactly.
And that's what's happening. I remember when I was a young student, I used to spend at least 2 hours in a week or 3 days on studying in candlelight. But today every village of India has electricity. Now that has happened at the level of 1.4 billion people. Imagine the impact globally about development process and opportunities for human resources.
So as you've mentioned, neighbors, crucial, because if they are your friends, you can have tremendous cooperation, you can have great relationships, you can collaborate instantly, but they could also be your biggest foes, your biggest enemies. And all over the world, throughout the history, a lot of nations were friends, then foes, then enemies, then strategic partners. And who would be today's India's strategic partners? Given the fact that India has a really strong economy, it has a lot of capital flowing throughout the world, throughout foreign banks, businesses, but also about 44 million Indians living outside Indian borders. So whether it be exchange students, professors in foreign colleges, or even people working abroad. So who would be, by say those 2 criteria, who would be India's strategic partners today?
Okay, so what is a strategic? A strategic is something in which you want complete trust and transparency. So if you have a relationship with a country in which there is absolutely 100% trust, that relationship can be called a strategic. Because if there is a COVID crisis, you can take the vaccine without any fear that this vaccine is right or wrong. If there is a problem of for example, something related to you want to do some mission to space and you are missing some particular element in your space mission, you would never shy away taking that help from a strategic partner country.
Exactly.
So I would categorize 5 sectors which primarily define how I would categorize a strategic partner. Are you cooperating in defense? Are you cooperating in space exploration? Are you cooperating in renewable energy? Because climate change is a global challenge.
Exactly.
Are you cooperating? Do you have enough critical mass to cooperate in that field? Are you cooperating in manufacturing? Because manufacturing provides jobs and manufacturing provides solution to the society. And finally, are you cooperating in terms of food security, energy security? So when you look at these 5 sectors and look at India's cooperation with different countries, automatically at least around about 35 countries with whom we have a strategic partnership, called a strategic partnership.
Yeah.
We choose it very carefully because we just want to use this adjective with everything because we clarify that what kind of trust we have.
Exactly. Yeah.
So if you look at this, there are countries like, big countries like US, Russia, France, Israel, and you have to not have ticking in every box of those 5 sectors that I mentioned.
Exactly. Yeah.
But if you are ticking at least 3 boxes, there is a sense that we have a strategic partnership.
Exactly. Yeah.
When I talk about defense, India's policy in defense is about, defense is an enabler. If you are secured in terms of defense of your country, of your people, you can then focus your energies on development. Defense in India, in our mindset, is not about usurping somebody else's land. Defense in India is about protecting the rights of our citizens and our friends.
Yeah.
So from that point of view, you should understand defense is strategic, but in a passive way.
Yes.
To have a passive capacity so that we are secured, our citizens are secured, that nobody can challenge our day-to-day life.
Yes, yes. And the prosperities, I believe, of
and space on the other side
business, yeah.
is active for the whole humanity. That can we do something exploratory which can help the whole humanity.
Yeah.
Other 3 sectors are more day-to-day life for citizens.
Exactly.
Manufacturing, food, and renewable.
Development, yeah. So 35 partners, as you've mentioned, not easy to tick all boxes. Given the fact that the world is quite fast changing, as you've mentioned before, because of technology and technology advancements, the partners that India has, could history or historical relations between India and said country, could they impact the future, let's say future collaborations and strategies, sort of coordinations, right? So in essence, because some countries really have a tough memory, right? They remember vividly something that another country did to them, and does India's history with other countries influence its future, and who would it take as a strategic partner, regardless of the 5 criteria that must be checked?
I would say that history is a very important element, that it's an important subject for every diplomat, because unless you understand the history, you can't chart the path for future. So history is an important subject, but history is a lesson of learning from history, not to repeat the mistakes.
Yes.
Learning from history what we have done better. But history should not be a block in our future endeavors. History is a teaching. Also, when we study history, we should also be intelligent enough to understand who has written that history.
Yes.
Because when you read history books, you have to be absolutely clear that are you reading the history which is real truth, or whether that is a propaganda written by victors.
Exactly.
And that's why you have to be careful about history.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's why I clarify that history can be a good tool to develop your initiative with this to awareness that history should not be a block and history should not be taken sacrosanct depending upon who has written it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. As you've mentioned, the history and people writing history, rewriting history, leaning towards victors or losers. We see that in, for example, the higher academic circles in the United States, for example, Canada, a lot of universities are starting to, I won't say even rewrite history, but even to censor history, right? So I absolutely agree that history must be taught and it must be thoroughly researched and understood in order to, especially when 2 countries have to cooperate and to sort of examples that have happened in the past, so we can clearly pinpoint them. Okay, this is what we should do, this is what we shouldn't do because this and that happened, right? So that was kind of my interesting analysis that universities really do have that sort of flexible way of interpreting history, right? So facts aren't facts, but then rather facts are here to sort of influence and interest some groups.
Yeah, I think when you look at the policy, I mentioned to you about 5 S's. But there is another very important way to look at what India is trying to bring to the table and doing in terms of action as far as internally what is happening in India, or what happened during the G20 presidency of India, which just finished on 30th of November. We are hinting and suggesting, which is now taking ground among people, among countries, that our globalization should be human-centric. Economic growth should be human-centric. Governance should be human-centric. Growth, cooperation, governance, if they are human-centric, there is no country in the world which can object to it. Exactly. Our problem of, there have been a lot of questions when the COVID-19 happened, that is the globalization ending? Because people were stuck in their homes. Yes. No, that kind of globalization is going to end, which is profit and greed based. That globalization which is human centric is most important, because that's how humanity is. It has to expand. It can't be curtailed. But if it is profit motive, then humanity will suffer. You saw what happened in 2 years.
Yes.
Same thing, growth, economic growth. Is the last person standing on the queue is looking forward to tomorrow or not? That should be the criteria of policy making. Lastly, governance. Like my Prime Minister says, we should have minimum government and maximum governance. We should have least amount of ministers to deliver the goods to the public, where government has a role. Exactly. He also says government has no business to do business.
That's quite well said, yeah. That really reminds me of the Ronald Reagan's era in the 80s and Margaret Thatcher, the minimal government, the sort of the, as they call it, the nanny state, right? Government shouldn't watch people all the time, reviewing every transaction, every move, every information. Okay. So let people breathe.
You should provide the level playing field, ease of doing business, the ecosystem and the ground that you provide, so that things flourish based on the natural strength of people.
Exactly. Yeah.
So government role is to provide the highway. It has no role to provide the cars. Cars should be done by business.
Exactly.
But the highway should be made by government.
Exactly. As to regards to prosperity and and the governance, I've mentioned before the ASEAN, BRICS, and I would even mention African Union, because Africa as a continent is, for mostly unfortunate reasons, becoming popular again in the mainstream, in the media. What are India's relations with those three institutions, international institutions, international organizations, so ASEAN, BRICS and the African Union?
Right. So, in our G20 presidency, one of the biggest achievements has been that African Union is now the 21st member of G20. Yeah. And this proposal has been there for some time, but PM Modi had made it a point that let's not waste our presidency to let it go one more time to another. And in a very, very emotional scenes, when he did this kind of, as a president of the G20, put that hammer, and he welcomed the president of the African Union to the G20. It was one of the highlight of G20 presidency of India. We have very good people-to-people contact with African countries. We are doing a lot of good work in terms of educational, digital networks. So whatever strength India has, we are offering that to African countries, especially in the area of digital transformation, in the area of renewable energy, in the area of infrastructure development, depending upon our capacity. And don't forget, very important sector, healthcare and pharmaceuticals. So a lot of India-made vaccines went to many countries in Africa and some countries in Latin America.
And India has suffered very much because of the pandemic, and I remember the news as they were happening, the respiratory tanks, the health infrastructure, it was quite overwhelming for India, if I could say so. So cooperation with the African Union, as we've mentioned, is quite healthy and strong, right? And
it is, and it is only going to become better and better, because they say that India is growing today at 7-8%, and the next decade is India's decade. But after that decade should be Africa's. That's how the economics works. That wherever there is younger population, when they get the critical mass, they start growing. Today, India's average age is 28.5. 1.4 billion people. So that's why India is in that sweet spot where every parameter of economic development is positive for India. So there is no doubt, no research is required to predict that India's growth will be really set
in the next decade or two.
But then afterwards, where is the next growth possible in this planet? Africa. So that's why this is also a momentous occasion that African Union was taken into G20, because this decade is the preparation decade when Africa will actually deliver in terms of economic growth, inclusive economic growth.
So what are the India's relations inside of BRICS? As some media would say, and some critics might even say, the opponent or proponent to G7. And the G7's, let's say, economic club, BRICS would be another one. Again, those are words of some of commentators that I've found on the news channels, but how does India position itself in BRICS?
So as I mentioned from the start, that if you are making your policy making based on simple principles, which are explainable to every stakeholder, your policy making will become very simple. You don't have to create, like they say, that you show me a face and I will tell you a rule. That is not India's policy making. So with BRICS, we try to do what we can do together, mostly in terms of development. Because there is a BRICS bank, there are projects that the funding from that BRICS bank is executing. There are issues in which we have cooperation. There are hundreds of meetings that take place in different sectors. And most important advantage of BRICS is for people to get connected. Because it is the people who do the business. It is the people who create cultural cooperation.
Exactly.
Not the government. Government provide again the highway. Let the business do the business.
Exactly.
So BRICS is that platform where it allows people of countries which are substantial in size. They bring something unique. For example, if you see the BRICS countries, the original BRICS countries, they are defined in terms of their key strengths. So India being the head of the service sector, China being important in manufacturing, Russia being important in oil and gas, Brazil being the granary of the world, agriculture, and South Africa being the mining hub. Now we are expanding. From 1st January there are 6 new members, which is also a kind of a call that Prime Minister Modi said that, with time we should be aware that things are changing and we should be ready to make those reforms in our institution. The signal was towards UN Security Council.
So BRICS is quite developing, and if I could say, it has a sort of flexible future at hand. So it's not pinpointed to a certain solution, but if we add new members, new policies may address, new policies may be created in order to address all members, like a kind of inclusivity, right, between all the member states, or from the first generation, as you said, of countries, and in the future ones, right, which could, who knows, if and when will they end. What about the ASEAN countries, the Southeastern Asian?
We have a very, very strong relationship with Southeast Asia. Each country we deal with them bilaterally. So even though it's ASEAN as a multilateral or plurilateral institution, but with each of those countries, 10 countries in ASEAN, we have very, very strong bilateral relationship. I have served in Myanmar for 3 years, and I can tell you it's a very important country for us. India is very important to Myanmar. We share long border with them, so they are neighborhood first policy, not only ASEAN but neighborhood policy, and also culturally, historically, like if you go back in time sufficient enough, you will find the countries were different. In the way that we see today on the map, it was different. So people are very similar. I was very surprised to find 60 villages north of Yangon, where people who live there are the people who left in 1870s for sugarcane farming from Indian Eastern Belt. And they speak the language of that Eastern Belt of India, what was spoken in 1870.
That's interesting.
I went there and I felt like I have been put in time machine and put 150 years back. Imagine, this is the beauty of people-to-people relationship, because we have moved forward. Those people have kept the culture as it was in 1870.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We had a Malaysian ambassador. He gave a lecture a couple of weeks back, and he was also mentioning that there's a large Indian diaspora in Malaysia.
Absolutely.
And very healthy, very of course business oriented, right? And
you go to Bali in Indonesia, and you will feel like any Indian who goes to Bali feels like that there is a sense of a spiritual connection.
Yeah. Like because sort of this is ours, like we feel welcome here, right? Yeah, it's kind of the same situation that one individual would find itself in Balkans, right? From Croatia, Serbia, Bosnia, Montenegro, right? Because it's the same languages, same landscapes, well, similar landscapes and languages, yeah. So that's very nice to hear. So there's not even as regarding to the southeastern countries in Southeastern Asia, not even that government relations, but people relations, right? The communities, I believe tourism is very active in the region between India and Malaysia, Indonesia.
Right. As the Indian economy is growing, the middle class is growing.
Yeah.
People are looking for newer experience, and I think after COVID-19, this experiential tourism has become the buzzword. People do not want to do the same tourism that we used to do, tick off.
Yeah.
They want to experience the moment. And from that point of view, all these countries are so beautiful and rich that you can have a totally experience which is unforgettable, and you don't have to take pictures and put it in social media.
Exactly.
Because that is the tourism that is fake, where you create a happiness which is not inside you.
Yeah, it's just so you could brag or whatever. Yeah, Malaysian cuisine is very very delicious. Yeah, so tourism, and also you've mentioned that tourism is something that in your interview with Romana Bolkovic a couple of years back, that tourism is something that India is keen to focus on as to regards to India and Croatian, right? Bilateral relations. So how does India actively, as I could say, develop tourist destinations, but also, as you said, as the middle class is growing, the purchase power is growing, so that Indian people could travel abroad. So how's India doing with the tourism aspect?
Yeah, so I think like you have tourism contribution is around about 20+% of GDP.
Yeah.
In India, I think it is 5 to 7%. So there is huge potential to increase the tourism contribution to our economic growth. And I think that's why we are very focused to improve our tourism infrastructure. Culturally, we are very rich, but we have been not doing justice to the rich heritage we have in preserving them and making them accessible to the international tourist. For example, Kashmir was totally out of our tourism circuit thanks to the policies and thanks to the what you call this article which was giving a temporary provision, which because of which tourism and the development of that state did not take place as much as rest of the country was developing. Now from August 2019, suddenly Kashmir has become again back the tourism hub. I was reading some 2 million Indian tourists had gone in the first quarter of this year. So that is what is happening in India, that with the money of economic growth, we are pouring it back into our infrastructure development, experiential tourism development, and also there is something called internal tourism. We are not only focused on external tourism, foreign tourists, but we are also promoting that you should see your own country. So in Hindi there is a 3 words slogan, Dekho apna desh, see your own country. It's been given as a tagline, and people put this when they put pictures on social media that I have seen my own country.
Oh, that's quite beautiful. India is a big country, so there's a lot of opportunities.
Exactly. Unlike most of the flights end up doing a 1.5 hour flight.
Oh, really?
That's happened in Europe.
As regards to the tourism, we could sort of continue along. Health. Health was something that coronavirus pandemic really affected. both in Europe and the North American continent, and of course in India and other Asian countries. But India has quite a resilient, quite strong health sort of presence inside of the communities and individuals, right? With the yogas and the diets that would seem special in Europe and European cultures, but would seem normal in India. So what's the regard as to health centers, the rehabilitation centers, and this sort of health tourism, if you will? So people who would say come to India to have a hip surgery because it's way cheaper and way more professional than in any other country.
Right. So medical tourism is again connected to experiential tourism because you are going for a purpose.
Yeah.
Right. Medical tourism has two aspects. One is that when you get a specific treatment, another is just rejuvenation.
Yeah.
That you go because you have a stressful life and you try to forget everything for 1 week or 10 days and come back full of energy.
Yeah.
Both these aspects have great potential in Croatia and India. I'm very happy that there are a lot of people very knowledgeable about yoga and Ayurveda in Croatia.
Yeah.
So that's why it has continuously increased from 2015, when 21st June became the International Day of Yoga at UN with the support of all the countries. Croatia has celebrated International Day of Yoga from 2015, but last year we did celebrating 75 years of India's independence, 75 events in 75 different towns.
Oh, really?
And a lot of people asked me, there are not enough towns in Croatia, how can you do in 75? And then I said that it is very easy. You can count 15 into 5. There are 5 zones in Croatia.
Yeah.
So Vukovar to Varazdin, Zagreb and around, Kvarner, Istria and Dalmatia. In each place, in each of these zones, let's do 15 events. And then it became very easy. And then we did 75 events. It was a great experience how people are aware about it. They want to join it if they are not aware. And how you have your own yoga expert. So you don't have to import anybody from outside, your own yoga expert will leading that effort.
Yeah, or to view it on YouTube and look to lectures, you can have actually some physical person that is knowledgeable enough to...
Exactly.
And
this International Day of Yoga was also an Indian initiative at the UN level because there is some, like before that, yoga was not understood properly. Yoga is not exercise. Yoga is a thought process, a mindset where you understand what is the real meaning of human existence. Yoga means in Sanskrit unity. So it's a concept of unity of body and mind. It's a concept of unity of man and nature. And it is the concept of inner universe and outer universe. Now at that level, when you think that way, you will be more empowered. If you are alone, you know that universe inside you is as big as universe outside. So that loneliness doesn't come in to hit you, the depression. So when in India lockdown happened, in India yoga became more popular during that time because people knew about it. They had not much to do, and they understood that by doing yoga and using those principles, you can actually reduce your depression. So that helped.
So I believe, when you've mentioned it, it more sounds kind of like a philosophy, if you will.
Philosophy, again, as soon as you say philosophy, the scientific world takes a distance. It's not, because philosophy or metaphysics is used as a kind of a negative word for the people who think themselves to be scientific. I say it is spiritual. And spiritual again can be religious connotation, but spiritual means going beyond 5 senses. You have 5 senses which are for your survival. So you know which are 5 senses.
Smell.
But if you are stuck in those 5 senses, you are missing out the real human potential, which is beyond these 5 senses. Yoga teaches you to go beyond those 5 senses. That is called 6th sense, which is the one that you get sometimes when you immediately predict that something is going to happen, and if that happens, then you feel surprised because your 6th sense could guess it.
That's very interesting. As you mentioned, the COVID crisis, the coronavirus pandemic. How has India recovered, and is it recovering well? Could the process be faster? How's the deal with the effects, if you will, of the coronavirus?
I think COVID-19 has been a challenge, but in every challenge there is an opportunity. And COVID-19 has been a great opportunity. First of all, to create this self-confidence that come what may, we are self-reliant. We can do it ourselves.
Yeah.
So when this crisis happened, a lot of juggling was happening from where to get the vaccine. So we did that we need to have an international partnership to get some vaccine from abroad in a joint venture.
Yeah.
But then we also focused, Prime Minister Modi focused on this, that we should develop our own vaccine. Now why? Because before the COVID-19, we knew that every third vaccine in the world was being produced in India. We already were good in vaccine production. So we used to joke that there is a chance that if you count three children, the third one might have taken Indian vaccine in their childhood.
Yeah.
Now, there was this background that we had the capability, and there was this idea that when a crisis happened, do things self-reliant way. So, in fact, during COVID-19 time, Prime Minister Modi gave this slogan to the whole country, Atmanirbhar Bharat, self-reliant India. And that has become a buzzword in every field since then, in last 2 years.
Yeah.
So that's what I was saying. COVID-19 was a crisis, but it was converted into an opportunity by giving that slogan that becomes self-reliant.
Yeah.
And that applies not only to the country, it applies to the poorest of the poor person. Don't take subsidy for survival. Take subsidy to open a business.
For
so that you are self-reliant.
As you mentioned, there is also the one district, one product, the district hub. Mentions that Prime Minister Modi has said as to every community and hub should be sort of self-reliant, right? Should be, because India is a big country, to sort of trickle down on logistics and to sort of self-provideness between the communities and the hubs. Yeah. So could you explain a bit more about
yes, this project has 2018. I think the biggest, most populated state of India, where I come from, Uttar Pradesh. That state had come out with this policy called promoting one district, one product. And Uttar Pradesh has 75 districts. Taj Mahal is in Uttar Pradesh, or Varanasi, which is very popular among tourists from abroad. So the idea was that we have these traditional products in which the local people take pride that this is my product. Let's give them the technical support so that they can develop that product in a much more international way. Meaning that they can do packaging, they can do publicity like in different languages, they can do the marketing, and can they put it in a open source digital platform so that the buyer and seller are directly contacting without the middleman. So that the person who is making the product gets empowerment, he gets the money directly from the client rather than a middleman takes away 90%, saying that I am doing your branding. So the branding was done by the state, digital platform provided the direct connection, and the person who was making the same product suddenly was earning him 5 to 6 times more. This is the empowerment. And this one district, one product, I give you some statistics that in 2018, the total export of these products from Uttar Pradesh was contributing 33% of the state GDP.
Individual state.
In that state, 33%. In 2022 or 2023, 5 years down the line, this has become 75%. You can imagine.
Growth,
You can imagine that how your small scale handicraft products, which are done by local artisans, can contribute to growth of your economy if you do it right.
If you support the community.
Support it, and also support it in a manner in which you are taking away those anomalies of the economic system in which the person who is doing the job is not benefiting.
Exactly. And the middleman is mostly benefiting because of the branding. And let's continue on with the. And
now this ODOP, one district, one product, has become a global platform for whole of India. It started with UP, but now 765 districts of whole of India have the one district, one product. And I am very happy that we did an exhibition in Ethnographic Museum this year in January for 2 months. And next year, January 2 months, it is going to Maritime Museum of Rijeka.
Oh, really?
So people in Croatia can also see those products in museums.
That's really great to hear. Speaking of Croatia, let's sort of broaden it. The European Union. How does India maintain and foster its relations with the EU? Sort of, let's say, on both political and economical level. You've mentioned, and as I have gathered some data, again, India is a thriving economy, a lot of perspective in the future, and so is Europe, startups and the cohesion funds from the EU. So how does that tie in the EU-India bilateral relation?
Yeah, so again, as you asked about the ASEAN, and I mentioned to you that our individual bilateral relationships are equally strong, if not more.
Yeah.
Same thing applies to European Union. At the level of European Union, because in European Union policy is trying to be done as uniform way, so wherever European Union has competencies, we are cooperating with European Union. But also bilaterally, we have a strong relationship, a strategic partnership with France. We have a very strong partnership. Now this year, we established the strategic partnership with Italy. Not before this year, but this year we have done it. Because there is a, I think, change in perspective in Italy to look at India as a holistic relationship. So that is showing. Similarly, we have very good business relationship with Spain and Germany. UK is now, after Brexit, out of EU, but in European continent, we have a very strong relationship with UK. So when you talk about EU, we are working very closely with EU to establish our free trade agreement or a preferential trade agreement. We don't know when it will be fructified, but it has a long history of almost 15 years, 1.5 decade. But suddenly in the last 1.5 year, most progress have been achieved. So there is a promising aspect of this negotiation that we will be able to, some point of time in coming months, be able to fructify it and convert it into an opportunity for business people from the two sides.
Excellent.
And we have an India-EU Innovation Network, under which there was one of the summit that took place in Bangalore, and I was very happy 3 startup policymakers and the contributor from Croatia were also part of that delegation.
Also, as you mentioned, and of course given your technological background, in the May of this year, 2023, the TTC has been established between the EU and India, the Trade and Technology Council, which gives a lot of benefits in the quantum technologies, in the artificial intelligence, space exploration and sorts. So would you give a comment about the council that has been established and what prospects could it give specifically in the technology sector?
So Trade and Technology Council, as it mentioned, trade and technology. So the idea is that it's strategic, because you are talking about those kind of technologies in which you need to have complete trust and transparency, as I started with the definition. So in this one will be headed by the ministerial level, joint ministerial level, that means foreign minister and commerce minister, and counterpart from EU. And the main areas of cooperation that will be looked at, as you mentioned, semiconductors, which are the key components of 5G technologies or the next generation technologies, quantum, and all those areas which will be coming up in the coming years. The idea is that to have such a council at the level of 2 ministers itself gives that confidence that we have come to that stage of trust, that we are ready to talk this in this format. India doesn't have that kind of council except with EU and US. So you can imagine that EU also has similar thing with US. So that shows that there is this understanding that there is much to gain by cooperating in such a strategic technological sector, which include AI, blockchain, data, and all those kind of things which are going to rewrite the future of humanity. The infamous tech diplomacy, right? It is really, that would be made in my humble opinion, but countries that
are really collaborating in the sector of technologies, innovation, space exploration, artificial intelligence. The fact that they have sort of pushed their hands from the table and said, okay, we can do it together. We don't have to race, as you know, in the 60s, who came to space first, who will send the first human, but it's more, as I could say, as similarly with the green policies, let's do it together for a brighter future, for a better results, because my resources as one country may be great, but all of us put resources together, we can achieve a lot more.
Right. So basically there's something called global commons, and global commons are the ones where one country cannot solve it. And also global commons, the problems are also generated not because of one country. So whether you talk about climate change, maritime security, space, outer space, or internet, you cannot control it. You cannot create a border. If you create a border, it is going to give discomfort to yourself, because those borders or those firewalls will make the potential of those technologies less and less for you. So it is in your interest to allow that flow of information, of course with rules and regulations, so that, like for example, the policy making in India, especially in the field of AI and technology, is driven by one principle: user harm. Is a particular incident, is a particular process creating harm to the user, then that process should be taken out, or that particular product should be taken out from the public sphere. If the user harm is not there, then we can negotiate and we can work on it, what is good for everybody. But user harm, no compromise. It's something similar that I started with on the terrorism. Zero tolerance for terrorism, zero tolerance for user harm.
So again, the focus is on the individual, right? So the individual user, people, exactly.
Human-centric.
Exactly. So there's quite a consistency.
So for example, the tagline in India is AI for all, human-centric, responsible AI.
Really? That was Prime Minister Modi.
I think now what has happened, yes, Prime Minister Modi is a people's Prime Minister. So naturally it comes back again and again. But the idea is that this is a simple principle. So it's very difficult, very easy to make it understood. Question is, are you actually putting that in action? Because when you put that in action and the results are seen by people, then it is very difficult to not to replicate.
Exactly,
So 10 years has been a long time, where he has shown with his initiative like Digital India, Startup India, Skill India, which are now the real fulcrum of India's growth. Digital India, when it was launched, people did not understand what's the meaning of it. 7 years down the line, 2023, 45% of digital transactions of the world are taking place in India. And people thought that India has illiteracy, how will they do digital transactions? But you need to have visionary leadership to foresee what is going to be important for the people.
Exactly. A lot of startups being supported by the government in India.
Startup. When we launched Startup India in 2016, we had 2 unicorns. Today we have 115. We had less than 1,000 startups. Now we have 110,000 startups.
I saw a facility of over 50,000 square meters that was built. I mean, it's
that's impressive. In Hyderabad, and that is the biggest incubator on this planet right now, with 5,000 startups working under one roof.
Exactly, and there's a sort of a picture, and there's a car down the road, so you can see like comparison, like it's a huge building, like enormous project.
It's called T-Hub 2.0.
Exactly, 2.0. I remember it. So in that regards,
I want some of the selected startups of Croatia to visit next year for a week or 10 days to an immersion program to Indian startup ecosystem, including to T-Hub 2.0.
That would be a great sight to see. So, as you mentioned, in a decade or two, India is on very stable path to becoming an even larger and stronger economy. What are its goals as to regards to economy and also culture? We can, in the pop culture, we have Bollywood, which is a very thriving and resilient movie producing, series producing. So where does India sees itself in 10 to 20 years? Does it have any policies, any plans, or?
Yes, so I think in terms of giving focus, in terms of our effort, it's always good to have some targets. But those targets should not be, again, the block. Because I think we know that as soon as you set the target, you make sure that you don't ever go beyond that. Really? So India, I think, is not setting targets to stop itself from growing. It is setting some kind of target which are easy to understand. For example, we got independence from British in 1947. Yeah. In 2047, we will be 100 years old democracy in this phase. Yeah. So Prime Minister Modi, at the celebration of 75th year of India's independence, gave a call to the nation that this is the good time to have 5 resolves, and those 5 resolves will put us in a good platform to take this journey of next 25 years of making India a developed country by 2047. Now when you say developed, it's difficult to explain what is the parameter when you define a country has become developed. Yeah. So all those things are flexible, but the idea is that there is a resolve, and those 5 resolves are more important to understand the mindset change. Yeah. One of them is drop this mindset of coloniality, where you thought that nothing can be done by you, you need some help from outside. Yeah. Colonial mindset, drop it. Have this hard-working attitude, because nothing can be achieved with easy life. Yeah. So hard work towards that. Unity and solidarity is very important in a diverse country like India. You need to have a sense of entitlement, which is there in democracies, but more important than entitlement, you need to have sense of responsibility, duties. That's why the King's Path in the center of Delhi is now called Duties Path.
Really?
Again, a mindset change. Yeah, yeah. So these are the things that he has done initially to show that somebody is thinking, but later on it is now impacting day-to-day life, because people have that self-confidence that you can achieve things self-reliantly.
Yeah, yeah. So basically the future isn't sort of pinpoint, as you said, pinpoint goal-specific targets, but more of a mind frame, of a mentality, exactly, as to where we want to be in 25 years with the 100th celebration.
So I think the focus in individual life and in nation's life should be on the present. Right now, what you can do best, that should be the focus, with some targets so that you are going in the right path. Yeah. But you should not say that that is the destination, because in our philosophy also, or in our Gita, it is said that you need to work, forget about destination. Destination will come, and that's just a byproduct.
Yeah, yeah, of hard work and, as you said, the unity that a country needs. So again, so it's coming from the individual, from the people, and expanding towards the government and achieving its goals. So as to take back to, let's say, diplomacy and international relations, where could India position itself in today's multilateral world? We saw the rampant growth of China, its population, its economy, its military, but also US is, again, it's keeping the status quo, it's keeping its power, it's keeping its economic and military contributions throughout the world. So where could India position itself in the international relations mentioned?
I think India is already positioned in the international relations because the focus of India has always, as I mentioned already, about human-centric growth, human-centric globalization, human-centric governance, and doing it well back home to show that 1/6 of the population is growing, democracy is delivering. Yeah. That was Prime Minister Modi's address to the UN General Assembly last year, where he said, dear friends, democracy has delivered. And that's the experience of my 20 years of public life. Thankfully, a book has come on Prime Minister Modi at 20.
Oh, excellent.
And this book is an excellent book about people who have worked with him or have seen him working, have contributed in this book, telling about how has he been as an individual creating a mindset change in different aspects of country's life. So democracy can deliver. That is the best message that you can do to promote democracy. And he said that democracy should not only be by the people, for the people, of the people, it should be with the people, within the people. He added 2 more words, with the people, within the people. And that's very important to understand. When we talk about democracy in the global geopolitics, it has to be a multipolar world.
Exactly.
Then only democracy can come.
Yeah.
So democracy should also be in the international relations, and that means multipolarity.
Exactly.
That's why when you talk about BRICS expansion, it's natural. As the globe is expanding, as the people are expanding, institutions should not be stuck in the time warp of past centuries.
Yeah.
They should reinvent, otherwise they will become obsolete.
Exactly, yeah. They should evolve. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. As to sort of get to the last couple of questions regarding diplomacy itself, the world is at the stage where it is right now. Some might say it's going great, some might say it is going bad, some might say that diplomacy is failing and whatnot, but we see a lot of countries having disputes, whether it be territorial disputes, military, economic, historical or religious disputes. How could diplomacy sort of restart, start over again as to calm down the conflicts that are happening around the world? Because we see that conflicts are happening within countries. For example, migrations in the EU have brought tremendous changes inside the governments, but also between said two countries.
I think when you say that today's time there's a lot of conflict and all that, one thing we must understand, humanity has always gone through this. So there is nothing new in today's situation. Mm-hmm. We should be very clear about it. Yeah. And that's why it is important to see a broader vision of where we came from.
Exactly, the history.
Right? When the first human cell in this universe came. When you have that kind of broader perspective, the smaller things that happen in country's life or individual's life becomes a small dot in the overall expansion of the universe. Yeah. That concept is very important, because then first of all you don't take those challenges in a paralyzing way. Mm-hmm. We have been there before. Exactly. And we have solved them. We will solve it again. That is very empowering feeling. Mm-hmm. With that, when you go to negotiating table, you have that feeling that we are not new to this. My predecessors, my ancestors have done it, and I am just going through the motion. Yeah. Second, again, if you are thinking that human beings have certain things different than other beings on this planet, then humanity should be the focus. Mm-hmm. Climate should be the focus. Because human and nature, these are the two aspects of this universe. And once your policies are driven towards that, you are able to create an atmosphere of collegiality. Mm-hmm. Yeah. As soon as you create these fake identities, which are stuffed into our brains, that you are this flag, you are that particular tribe, you are that particular caste. That is the artificiality that we create in our human life, which is so difficult to get out of it. Yeah. And that's why we have disputes. So at the global level, we need to create such kind of ideas where people forget their identities. Mm-hmm. That's why sports are very important. That's why cultural festivals are crucial. Yeah. Because these are the two areas where people really remember one thing, that we are all humans. Yeah. We forget where you are coming from. That's why when you have children festival in Shivening, it's a great thing, because people just remember that this is for children, not of Croatian children.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's the idea, that importance in diplomacy about how to bring people together on areas where you tend to leave your identities outside. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think many of the conflicts can be resolved if we do this. Because we hold our identity so close to us, whatever be the explanation you can give, you will never solve, because other side will say, I also have an identity. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the commonality is humanity.
Yeah. And everyone who has an identity has an interest. Everyone who has an interest has a means to achieve that interest. But in essence, diplomacy should be about compromise, if you would agree. Something that we can both profit from, if not maximum profit, at least some kind of profit. But
I can explain to you this in a very interesting way that I thought about, that you have convergence in political thoughts. Yeah. That means you have no problems. You have cooperation, or you have commonality between India and Croatia, for example. Let's take the example of India and Croatia. Sure. We both are democracies, so we have convergence on democratic values. Good. We both are diverse countries. You are small, we are big, but both are diverse. You have so much of diversity in a small country like Croatia.
Yeah.
So diversity is the commonality between two. But right now, there is one field in which there is a complementarity. And that is where you see the maximum amount of progress or maximum amount of cooperation. That is demography. You know, when I came 3 years back, there were 250 Indians on Indian passport holder living in Croatia. Today it is 11,500. It just naturally happened because there is a complementarity in the demographic situation of Croatia and demographic situation of India.
Yeah.
So the idea is that we as diplomats should try to find out where is the complementarity and try to create incentives or initiatives and programs where those complementarities can flourish.
Yeah.
Because convergence and commonality is good for books, but it does not build relationship. We are democratic countries. Good, there's no problem, but what to do?
Yeah, exactly.
Complementarities is where, for example, you have startups, but they don't have a scale because of low population, low demand.
Yeah.
Suppose a good startup goes to India. See example of Infobip.
Yeah.
Infobip became a unicorn by, one of the reasons was that it also got the exposure to India in 2008.
Yeah.
So that is the importance, that find the complementarity. You have technology, we have the demand.
Yeah.
Can we connect the two?
Exactly. Yeah. That's the sort of the essence of every strong bilateral relations is to I have something, you have something, even between businesses, even between people.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. And Ambassador, for our last question would be focusing on if you could give any personal advice, given that you've been in diplomacy for 6 years. Any advice to young people who would like to pursue diplomacy or similar career paths, whether it be through ministries of defense, foreign affairs, or international institutions, organizations and sorts?
Yeah, so I think not only to diplomacy, but this is just my self-exploration. So I would not give any advice that based on my experience, but I am just trying to give that advice which I am trying to apply to myself. And that is about the objective of human life. The objective of human life somehow is to discover what we are made of. So if you are made of an attitude which is exploratory, if you are made of an attitude which is expansive, to go outside world, meet people, meet new culture, experiment with it. If your attitude is towards focusing on creating opportunities for people, then diplomacy is for you. Because these are some of the common attitude and aptitude that you require to become a successful and happy, most importantly, diplomat, whichever country you come from. Similar thing applies to all other professions. If you enjoy painting, really it gives you timelessness. Timelessness meaning that you don't need to see the watch because time has stood still when you were involved in that activity. You need to find that out. In every individual, there is that one or two activities on which there is a sense of timelessness. If we find that, our objective of being human has been served.
Yeah, exactly. Mr. Ambassador, thank you very much for your time. It's been a real pleasure. Dragi gledatelji, nadamo se da ste uživali u ovoj jako produktivnoj i zanimljivoj epizodi sa njegovom ekscelencijom Ražom Kumarom Srivastavom. Hvala vam na pažnji i lijep pozdrav do sljedeće epizode.